Hey everybody, welcome back to another MSP Live Chat. This is Jonathan Crow. I'm Director of Content at NinjaRMM, and I've got with me Tom Watson, who's our Chief Channel Advisor. How's it going, Tom?
Good, Jonathan. How are you?
Doing good. Good to see everybody rolling in here. We're going to give, a couple minutes for people to trickle in, but thanks so much for joining us, guys. And for those who are new to our MSP Live Chats, you're going to see pretty quickly, we do this a little bit differently than a standard webinar. It's pretty informal. It's all built around, we've got a Google Doc here that we're going to be sharing with you in a second. That's going to be our agenda for this session. And we got a ton of links in there. There's going to be linking to the resources we'll be talking about, so you can go and check those out on your own. The cool thing about doing it this way too is you're going to have this document after this is over. And so we're going to respond probably tomorrow with the recording, but while you're waiting for that, you can still go back to the agenda, check out some of the resources we can link to. And if there's anything cool that you guys bring up that we should link to, I'll be live updating. And so it's a cool doc to have. For those of you who are not new and who have been joining us for the past month, for those who joined us at the MSP Security Summit that happened a couple weeks ago, thanks for coming back. It's really good to see you. And for those who are new and you want to know how to participate, by now I think it's pretty standard how these Zoom calls work. But just in case, we've got how to participate right here. Please use the chat. This is meant to be an interactive session. Tom's going to be whipping through a sample MSA document that he had updated recently, and he's going to be sharing the screen going through that. But this is really meant to be an interactive session, and we've got some discussion points that we want to dive into before all that. It's great to see in the chat people already jumping in. We got people from Puerto Rico, Canada. Got a couple of Canadians are actually really strong representing. We got that's a great job, guys. LA, good to see you. And so the other portion of this is, please feel free to use the chat. Think of this as your time to not just connect with Tom and me and see this document, but also connect with each other, ask each other questions, use the chat to dive into conversations with each other and really share resources and stuff that way. And then you can also go to the Q&A, and you can use that if you want to ask a question that's either something that's private. You can do that anonymously, so you're not connected with that in the chat. You can also use Q&A to make sure that Tom and I see something. One note about the chat: make sure if you open up the chat window and you look at the little blue window there, you've got a drop-down tab. Make sure it's all panelists and attendees, so that way the chat's not just going to us. Me and Tom, and also Sammy here, who's running things on the back end. Thank you, Sammy. But also it's going out to all the attendees too. So cool. So Tom, you want to get into kind of some of the story here, why we thought this was a good topic, kind of what's been going on, what you've been seeing, how this relates to your own experiences in MSP?
Yeah, absolutely, Jonathan. Well, I think what's important here, and I apologize to anyone in advance if I cut out at all, just let me know. I have a little bit of spotty internet connection today. But this goes back to a conversation that Jonathan and I had back in, I think it was February, where we talked about the idea of having a managed service agreement that we could work on at Ninja, and that we could provide to not only partners in Ninja, but kind of anyone who was interested in it. And so we started then, and I kind of went off an old MSA from my MSP days. And it was interesting because I was finishing it up just as kind of, things started to hit in terms of COVID. And then it became, well, does this really cover the times? And I kind of realized it didn't. And I went back into this managed service agreement and rewrote some of the sections like force majeure, which we've gone over before. Sections for your business and how you resolve issues. And that.
And yeah, you are breaking up a little bit, Tom.
All right, how's that now?
It's okay now. You can go ahead and if it breaks up or you cut off and you have to come back on, we can jump ahead a little bit. But yeah, pick back up where you were with that story.
Yeah, kind of. I've gotten to go through this at the same time MSPs have, even though I'm not an MSP anymore. And I've kind of revamped this MSP for what I think it should be for the times in terms of protections for your business, getting paid, protecting your employees, and all that.
Yeah, and I mean, this is something that I'm sure everyone here on the chat has either been curious about, like think back to when you launched your own MSP. This is one of the first things you're like, oh yeah, like, can I get a sample agreement anywhere? We constantly see this brought up on Reddit and other community forums. Who's got a sample they can share? And one note, so we're putting this out there for free. Please, like, take a look at it. Tom's gonna go through it, answer any questions about it, and feel free to have this spark ideas or kind of guide you as you're revisiting your own agreements or setting up your own agreements. But obligatory disclaimer, local laws, state laws are different everywhere. Before you use anything, you should absolutely talk with your attorney about this and review it with them. One of the other questions that we see all the time with those requests for, hey, can we see a sample, is complaints about having to pay attorneys and stuff like that. Hopefully this gets you a little bit started. It gives you something you're not starting from scratch if you're in that boat, or it just gives you ideas as you're looking at your already vetted agreement. Oh yeah, maybe I should talk to my attorney about this section. So anyway, I had to put that disclaimer out there. With that said, let's get into some of the reasons that everyone's here right now. Everyone thought this is an interesting topic, and some of the things you and I talked about, Tom. If we scroll down in this agenda document, why should MSPs revisit their agreements right now? I mean, reason number one, there's been a lot of, everyone now is just kind of coming up for air, right? I mean, these past few months have been pretty wild. And there's been a lot of, we call it here, goodwill, just get it done exceptions, some requests for discounts. And understandably, certain types of climates, this crisis has hit them really hard. This is a topic we've covered in previous chats. You may have heard from clients that they're asking for deferrals, for discounts. You may, in some cases, maybe you even decided to be proactive about that and give people a discount kind of across the board. And so I'm just kind of curious, you know, who out there, Sammy, if you could launch the first poll, you know, who here has actually done some discounts, given discounts or flexible terms with their clients. And while we're waiting for that to come in,
you know,
just want to give
this was one we kind of talked about. I was harkening back to, you know, the days of the Great Recession, and I gave away a lot of things, and I didn't, sometimes I did it piecemeal and gave people discounts, and other times move fast. You had to help
up, Tom.
You guys, and what did you do about it?
Yeah, so Tom, you unfortunately broke up a little bit there, but I think what you're saying is, you know, you were giving away a lot of good things. That we see this in comments here too. I've included in the agenda. I saw this on Reddit. A comment: in a time of crisis, panic for a lot of SMB clients. Obviously, you want to do the right thing, and so a lot of people are their hearts in the right place. They want to work with people. They want to be flexible. But then the question is kind of like, okay, awesome perspective, but what happens now? Are folks kind of dealing with maybe having some conversations with those people in terms of, okay, you know, how formalized were you in terms of, we want to help you out, but it's going to be for a specific amount of time. It's such kind of a gray area, and there's no clear guidelines around how to do this. And so that's really interested in getting people in the chat, giving a little bit more detail at that. So I'm sharing the poll here results, and it looks like almost inching up to 2/3 have done something, offered some flexibility there, some discounts, and then a third hasn't. So I'm just kind of interested, for those who have, Sammy, can we launch poll number 2? This is, did you formally document discounts or those special terms with clients? And basically what we want to know here is, you know, was this something that was done just kind of via email? Or was it something that was documented a little bit more clearly? Because Tom, if you're back here, if your audio is working and everything. I know you had specific thoughts about this, and this is something that you, coming out of the Great Recession in 2008, that you actively were kind of considering too, because there's that downside, or that danger, I guess, that once you get discounts, that becomes the expectation, and it can be kind of a hard thing to pull back from if you don't have specific stipulations in there or guidelines. I think you're muted right now, actually. Still muted. Well, we see in the comments that.
Can you hear me?
Go ahead. Yes.
Yeah, I'm trying to dial in through my phone. I didn't catch what you said.
Oh, that's okay. So just going back to here, I'll sharing these poll results. So, and talk about the formalizing how formalized did you get when you're offering discounts, or how case by case has it been? It seems like a lot of people, this hasn't been something that there's formal documentation involved with it. We see in the comments here, Bob Patterson, we always document any discounted time or services. If you don't show it in black and white, you're not credited for offering it all. Always document all reductions. I mean, another part of that, great point, Bob. Another point of that that you brought up, Tom, was if you don't attach a time period to it, then it's just one of those things where you're going to have an awkward conversation further down the line. The more specific you can get around it, the better. And it's such a conflicting thing, because you obviously in that moment, everyone wanted to be as helpful as possible and build up a lot of goodwill. If we go down in the agenda doc here to some of these examples, kind of what are other people doing around this? So we've got, if you go below the poll, Sammy.
Jonathan, I'm dialed in now. I don't think you can hear me.
Okay, great. Yeah, we can hear you just great. Thanks for doing that, Tom. The fun times of remote work. But yeah, Tom, I don't know if you wanted to jump in there then, just about some of the points that you were saying about the importance of having things documented. And for those people, we got a lot of answers of saying, no, it wasn't really documented at the time. We've got some suggestions there around how those conversations can happen. But I'm just kind of curious too, is if anyone who did not go through the documenting process, are you having those conversations now? Have you had any situations where maybe you're looking at usage of your services and you're seeing, people were down, we were charging them a discounted rate for a lower amount of users, but now people are starting to come back. Is that a conversation that you're having? Has anyone navigated that already? It'd be great to know in the comments.
Yeah, Jonathan, and then just to go in on that, we're trying to get a feel from people if they discounted, and then are they coming back around to people now, and how are those conversations going?
Yeah, and while people are kind of thinking about that, I think it's interesting to see some other approaches that people were taking. So for example, we've got this from Ray Orsini, who we had on during the MSP Security Summit. He's the CEO at OIT, VoIP. And he's saying that they only bill for usage. So what did they do? They allowed clients to go below they had a monthly minimum. They allowed clients to go under that through August. So stipulating a time period there. So they're only billing what they're using. They've also forgiven some payments for a few accounts that have had to shut down completely. But then if we go down further, we see this was, again, a great comment from the MSPs RS Discord group. If anyone here on the call is not part of that, you should definitely check it out. It's a great place where people are sharing a lot of experiences and good questions. It's a great community. But we have here Glenn Holcomb from Mighty Manatee IT, and he shared an example. He's put it as an invoice item. I was curious to get your thoughts on this, Tom. So basically, he made it very clear. He's named it a COVID-19 pandemic temporary discount. The keyword there being temporary, and he put a line item on an invoice. And for this specific example, he was saying, this was a travel client. The reason that he's offering it is they just lost 80% of their income for the year. This hit them really hard. So he cut this through September when they are guessing they're going to get some new bookings. And since they're small, he's still providing all services. But he marked it as temporary, makes it exact. It's something concrete. So those are some of the benefits of that approach.
Yeah, Jonathan, we had a good conversation, you and I, about this. And I think it is really applicable here that if you can do it in a formalized way, especially through your PSA and invoicing system, that's going to make it a lot easier to communicate and a lot easier to pull back if you have to, and when the time is right. We
see some comments here from Jim. We absolutely document all discounts given. Clients will never recognize if we don't. And so clients not really recognizing things, also having short memories. And Tom, I know you had some good points about it just being human nature about what you begin to expect. Once you get the lowered rate on something, you don't want to go back to paying full rates, right?
Absolutely. Once you get something at a discount, you kind of feel like that's what it is going forward. And we had talked about this too. There's kind of this view of pre-COVID and post-COVID. So if someone got something post-COVID in terms of a price break, they're kind of going to feel that that's due to them now, even if things get back to normal in their business. And that's what we've talked about. How do you communicate and make sure the client understands, hey, listen, we understand that you're back to full force because we can see it in the numbers of what you're consuming from us. So that means we go back to the old pricing.
Yeah, I know another thought you had was one way the conversation can go is, hey, we wanted to help you out. We introduced this flexible situation, this flexible rate for you. In order to extend that, we wanted to formalize some things. Would you mind, we need to formally agree on this kind of setup. So framing it that way of even retroactively, if there wasn't any kind of agreed upon dates of when those are going to end, putting it in that kind of perspective of, hey, we're glad that we could help you out with that at the time. I know that you guys were, this hit you out hard. It hit everybody, really came as a big surprise. Glad we could help you out. But in order to extend this, we're going to do this under this kind of rate.
Jonathan, before we go any further, I noticed we have George Bardisi on the line with us. And, George, as a lot of people probably know, is a longtime MSP owner. And he also owns Bevoid. And I think he's probably got some unique experience with, because he goes all the way back to the Great Recession too, about how do you pull back on things once you've given them to clients. So Sammy, maybe you can pull George on here and he can give us his perspective.
Would love to have George on.
Yeah, I know that we've, both you and I have tuned into a couple of George's, I think they're kind of a live chat on Facebook. They've been quite informative.
Yeah, I was actually on one
George,
earlier
there you
today,
are.
George.
Hey, what's going on, guys?
Hey, George.
How's it going?
Yeah, so we've got the question, but our big issue today and something we're dealing with is, I know MSPs out there are, once you've given something to someone, they kind of come to expect it. I'm sure you agree that. And how do you pull back on that? What have you done in those kind of situations? What do you recommend?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different ways to do it. And I guess the relationship with your customer, and the circumstances are case by case. And I'm sure that's, worth noting. And, probably didn't need to say that, but said it anyway. Yeah, I mean, listen, if you're going to offer discounts, I mean, some of the comments that were put out here are definitely valid, right? Hey, they're timed, right? They're not forever. Or if you're going to delay payments, we're going to tack them on to the tail end of the agreement, or agree when those, should kick back on, or when the extension would come due. I mean, listen, every customer's in a different situation, right? I mean, if you have a customer in the hospitality industry, man, they got pummeled, right? And obviously their circumstances would be different than others. And of course, if you're in a different part of the world, right, like New York and LA, who have said they're extending lockdowns until August, That's still a long road ahead, right? So there's an ebb and flow to that. I mean, but at the end of the day, I think what comes to be said, or it's worth saying, is that discounting is not the best scenario, right? I mean, your time has value. I mean, especially if you're in the middle of the sandwich, right? You need to still pay your vendors unless you have a special arrangement with them. And so at the end of the day, you're not a bank, right? You can't float money forever. Or is it fair to do so even if you could? So I think there's definitely a balancing act. And I think, to that, situation, you just need to make sure that, back to the comment of MSAs, which were what started this whole thing, right? Like your constitution needs to be very well written and well documented. And if you're going to make these changes, you should definitely, they said, hey, make sure it's documented, not just on an invoice. You should literally be sending as simple as an email to your customer saying, hey, we're amending our agreement. We've discussed this, and this is now amending, the existing, terms of this, of the current situation. Like, you need to have a documentation trail so that, if in the event something does happen, you're not in a situation where you're in a bad bind legally, right? I mean, that's really what ultimately ends up in the end if things go badly. Jay here, I see, is in the panel saying, ask yourself, what would the client do for you if the roles were reversed? Yeah, Jay, I mean, listen, it's a two-way street, right? You are supposed to be a business advisor. There's supposed to be a higher level of dialogue other than, hey, the power's out, call the electric company to come, figure out why we're down. I mean, I'm hoping that everybody's matured past just the janitor role, right? If that's what you want to call it. So there's got to be a business conversation. And I would hope that, most of the people who are having the conversations with the customers, it's an owner to owner thing, right? I mean, you both understand the situation, the circumstances. Hopefully they've taken advantage of PPP, IDLE, all those programs out there. So, like, you can't, if the worst thing you can do is avoid the conversation and then force yourself into the position where it's too late. That's my best advice to everyone.
Yeah, thank you so much, George. I really appreciate you coming on, first of all, and then and sharing that perspective. To Jay's point, I mean, asking yourself, would the client do it for you if the role was reversed? It kind of gets at something too that you said. I mean, hopefully you do have really great relationships with your clients. Going back to this example from Glenn Holcomb, he said we had one client reach out to us after a month of when he gave them a discount and said that we could resume normal billing on their own. They were proactive that way. And you hope in an ideal world that that's how it'd be, right? They got to a situation on their own where they said, thank you so much for doing that. We don't need it anymore. Let's go back to normal. But of course, we live in the real world, right? I mean, stress in business terms does strange things to people, and you may think that you have a good relationship with the client, but the whole point of this is you got to protect yourself, right? And I mean, that's what your agreement's all about. So thank you for bringing on that perspective. I'd be interested in getting your thoughts on this, and Tom's too. Everybody on the chat, chime in. So I came across Service Leadership. Everyone, I'm sure a lot of people are aware, familiar with them, of course. They issued a rapid recovery planning guide recently that I came across. Everyone should check it out. It's a very in-depth, I guess you would call it an article or guide, and it provides a lot of research that they've done where they're kind of forecasting what damage could be like, or how a looming recession could impact finances, and it gives you some tools to help you figure that out on your own and everything. It's a little dire and it's a little scary, and I want to caveat it with, they refer to it mostly as, hey, this mostly applies to enterprise, MSPs, mid-market. It's also, this is one scenario. We hope this doesn't happen. So before you do look at it, I just want to put that out there. It's kind of a scary doc. Take it with a pound of salt. But that said, they did have some interesting advice here. And they were saying, listen, do not negotiate different recession deals. So if you are going to discount or you are going to be flexible with clients, one of their suggestions was, well, why don't you, a better way to do that would be to at least standardize it across the board. So kind of interested in your thoughts about that. And for Joseph, you're asking a link for the guide. If you guys go through the agenda here, this is on page 4 of our 6-page agenda, and it's under the picture of service leadership. As Lucy from Peanuts. Anyway, there's a link to the rapid recovery guide that you can check out there. But yeah, any thoughts about that in terms of if you're going to discount, at least trying to standardize it?
Yeah, Jonathan. Well, George, you want to go ahead first, or I think we're probably gonna say the same thing.
I mean, honestly, unless I'm making a fundamental change in my service offering, like I'm taking a service out for everyone, or I'm putting a service on for everyone, yeah, no, I wouldn't necessarily standardize discounting. I would take it on a case-by-case basis personally. And if I were to go in and have a conversation about lowering a bill, the first thing I would ask is, what would you like me to remove? Meaning, what services do you think that you don't need right now that I can remove from the bill in order to lower the cost? I mean, that would be how I would approach it, to be frank.
You know, Jonathan, what I would do is I might come up with something that was like that I could put on amongst my staff that was like a trigger. Like, hey, if someone asks for this and you ask a couple of questions, they're going to be in the running for our COVID discount. We will say they're eligible for it. And then here's the standard discount that we will offer them. And hey, maybe that works for a lot of people. But the fact is that you're doing networks of friends, families, you become friends with people. You're going to have, as George mentioned, you've got people in hospitality got hit much harder than others. And so a lot of these are going to be individualized. And what it comes down to is you're probably best off focusing on documenting the change and communicating with the client and at least getting an email back from, as George said, saying, yes, I agree to that. That's probably the most important thing here, that whatever the discount is and however you come across it, that you actually, it's documented well. And that kind of veers us back into the MSA that we're talking about today, because the MSA is all about putting everything in writing and making sure you're protected.
Even if it's a free service, that's the other catch, right? There's a lot, you said there's a lot of people giving stuff out, you know, to do the right thing and help their customers. Awesome. But there's also potential liability associated with something that you give away for free too. So you really need to make sure that even if you're giving it away, that you're making sure that there's terms associated with that.
Absolutely. And I think that's a good transition here to dive into the MSA, Tom. We've got a couple of polls too that we want to launch to get people's thoughts. The first one is, when's the last time you revisited your MSA?
Yeah, and I just want to thank George for coming on with us. And appreciate it, George, and be sure to visit BVoIP
right on,
if you haven't already. Thanks.
See ya.
Yeah, thanks, George. Hope you stick around and engage in the chat too. And before we wrap up, we definitely want to make sure we bring some other people on too to get some stories. But
yeah, Jonathan, one thing that comes to mind here is that.
Go ahead.
One thing that comes to mind here is when I started looking into this with you about doing an MSA, I reached out to a lot of MSP owners out there, and I repeatedly found people that just hadn't done much with their MSA for years. Or a lot of times you've got original clients on your original MSA, and you haven't wanted to kind of upset things. You haven't changed it. And I think we're nearing a point with recent times that kind of, as those clients come up for renewals, maybe this is the time to revisit an MSA with them.
Yeah, I mean, you can see in our poll here, pretty interesting. So nearly half of you guys on here have revisited very recently. And so that's going to make this next question pretty interesting. Yeah, and then even a quarter in the past 3 months. So kind of curious, just in the chat, for those who have updated things recently, was it because of this current situation, or was there a specific thing that you were looking at? They're like, oh yeah, we really need to update that portion of the agreement. Just kind of curious in the chat. I think that'd be interesting for everybody to know. If Sammy, though, if you could, while we're doing that, launch into the next poll too, the next couple actually. Let's just go rapid fire. But yeah, I mean, anyone who answered that they did it recently, would love to know a little bit about your experience there. What triggered it? Did did you work with an attorney to do it?
Yeah, no, this is interesting, Jonathan. Because, I think a lot of managed service agreements come about from getting ones from other people or even from other industries and applying it. And one of the things that when I was working on this one for Ninja, I found out that you've got to, of course, pay attention to the laws in your state. And I was telling Jonathan last week about a really interesting point is that, a lot of states require that you have your agreement like in a 12-point font. And actually, they'll actually even say which ones to avoid like laws concerning like fine print. And so I had the agreement that we're going to go through in a minute actually grew by a few pages once I put it all up into 12-point font. It's just like a little nuance that's important in some places.
Right. And this is how the lawyers stay in business, right?
Exactly. They know these things.
Yeah, this is interesting. Joseph, we added wording to cover things like federal stay-at-home orders, quarantines, extreme things like martial law, because you never know. This is going to kind of go into some of the things you're talking about, the force majeure stuff, Tom.
Absolutely. Yeah, we've covered some
Dan
force majeure
Comas.
in past ones.
Dan, thank you so much for being part of another one of these, saying that after we had our first chat around this topic, went back and made some adjustments, added pandemic to force majeure. So Tom, you did some good work with giving Dan some advice.
Yeah, and that's what this agreement's all about. Is we want MSPs to be protected out there, and wow, it's amazing, what you realize you need to cover in your agreements beyond just services you offer to the clients.
Dan, you've been such a great participant for the past ones. Can we get you to come on again? Because you're saying that you also added specific language about home network support. I know that's something that everyone's on everyone's minds, right? And maybe while you're doing that, Sammy, can you launch our 5th poll? And this is a big question that we've asked before in previous sessions, so we can share some results that we've gotten in the past, but really curious about this. Do you feel like your MSA adequately covers the current situation? So even for those who have updated in the past year, hopefully the people who updated in the past 3 months, now they're saying yes. But curious, how covered do you think you are under your current agreement?
Jonathan, that's one of the things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Tom.
One of the things we're going to cover in here, and I'll hand over to Dan afterwards, is that part of us going to this MSA and making it available to you is that sometimes it's just nice to look under the hood that someone else has. And you might just nugget of what you should have in yours and pull one clause or something like that. So it's kind of like we want to give you a perspective what others out there are doing. I think now we're going to hand it over to Dan. We have him on, right?
Hey, guys.
Hey there.
Hey, Dan. Thanks for joining us again.
Yeah, thanks for putting this together again. Yeah, in addition to making the adjustment for pandemic and force majeure, which again we vetted with our attorney before we just plugged it into our MSA, which I definitely advise everybody to do, despite the great advice, the great language you guys are providing. We added something. We actually reworded how we handle home networks, people working from home or on the road, general, hotel travel, that sort of thing. That we technically are not responsible to support any of it, but we give a best effort, in that it's at our discretion, when to abandon essentially or close the ticket, just to make sure that we had the freedom to absolve ourselves if somebody couldn't work because they have some unreliable home network and potentially being difficult in troubleshooting it with the technician. We've run into that a couple of times. So I feel a little better about it. I don't know that we're going to have to go, fight with an owner about it at any point in time, but I do feel better knowing that it's in there and we can just simply refer back to it if, they bring up a problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for pointing that out. I mean, Tom, I know we had back and forth about that specific point about when you're remote, what you're promising you're going to be able to deliver is going to, it now all of a sudden depends on things like reliable internet access and all that other stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah, and you want to help. You want to give your best effort, like you said. But you know, the contract that most of us have signed is, you know, we're going to be responsible for the business network. You know, we can only control the devices that we can manage and maintain. And when you throw variables into it, that's not the agreement that was signed. You know.
Right.
You know, one thing I see in here, I see a Bob Patterson is that we generally no longer support home residential networks, but will service under break fix the networks that will work for our corporate clients. I'll tell you something I did. My strong vertical was, and as probably everyone on this call knows, the primary partners of a law firm will often work a lot of hours and will work from home a lot. And we always demanded that we rolled in and we set up the home networks for all those top attorneys who owned firms. And it really worked out well for us. So that way we would cover those under the agreement, under the terms, because we had set those up and often VPN'd them back into the office. But at the same time, we then had overages that we would charge for the others if they had problems with home and they were doing a lot of remote work. But we tried to cover a portion of the ones that are most important.
Yeah, and Joseph's responding that he likes that idea, Tom. Well, Dan, thanks for hopping on and explaining what you did. Definitely stick around, and as we're going through the agreement, if there are any specific aspects that you're like, oh yeah, this is the portion that we picked up on, would love to hear from you there. But thank you for sharing again.
No problem. Thanks, guys.
Tom, do you want to dive in?
Absolutely.
Should we open up the agreement?
Yeah, I don't know how my audio is, but I'm dialed in on the phone. Seems a little better.
It's definitely better than it was before, so I will let you know if you're cutting out again. And as we're pulling up the agreement, any questions you have at any point, definitely put them in the chat, put them in the Q&A. Also, just kind of curious, as for a lot of people who were answered, you know, this could be covered better, our agreement needs an overhaul. Any specifics you want to share in terms of, yeah, this specific aspect of it? Is it the things that Dan was just talking about, where it's the work from home, the home network aspect of it? Or is it something to do with security? Is there something else? Just kind of curious. And then Tom can make sure that he addresses that with or calls that out as he's going through the updated agreement.
Please put that in the chat. Now, I do notice one thing. This is the first time I'm seeing the document up on, we'll share it on Google. This is actually done, it's a docx Word document. And it looks like the Google system's done some funky things to the formatting. It looks better. We had some pretty good formatting done to it. So when you get the actual version, it's going to look different when you open up in Word. But I just want to start with one thing here that I know Jonathan and I talked a lot about. When I sold managed services, I didn't like to have a lot of paper, a lot of extra paper at the clients. And what I would do is, of course, we do the network eval. Myself or a technician would go out and do that. There'd be a meeting, and then the big meeting to sell them on the services. I came in with just the managed service agreement, and that's it. Now you'll notice that's probably why this is a little different than what most people have out there. This is the front page of the managed service agreement. And what I like to lay out on here is all the services offered. This represented the titanium package, which was our top level package. This was an all included. This would generally be for clients that were 30 users or more, and they wanted everything. Now, this list here is fully customizable in the document. And so anything you see on here, we're offering this document up as a template. So don't view it as anything in stone. View it as something that if you wanted to use it, you can make it happen. But I sold to this document, and this will show you, because when people sat down at the table, they didn't have anything that said proposal. They didn't have anything that said agreement right on it. They didn't have anything other than this document, and they were looking at exactly what they get. And the response I got from clients, or at that point prospects, was that, wow, I've always had a hard time understanding what I get from many people. I've got these 30, 40-page agreements. I don't know what I'm getting. But by selling with this way and with this list, people knew what they were going to get from us right from the beginning. And if Sammy or John, if you could scroll down, the next few pages are just going into, well, there's a table of contents, but then, and as I said, this looks quite a bit different than it does in Word. So bear with me. But if you scroll down again, the next few pages are just going to be what those services are. Because I just wanted to focus on from the very beginning with the client what you're getting. I didn't want to get into contract language. I wanted to explain to them what it meant that we were offering, what the offering was. And you keep scrolling. These, of course, are all customizable, can be changed, but they're just, 3 to 5 sentences of what those services are. And we can scroll down past this section, and then we start to get into some of the guarantees. Keep going. Yeah, so this is a very important piece right here. We have the managed service response times. And managed service requirements. Just gives you an idea of, I had a lot of limitations, as I'm sure many people do out there, about how old of a machine we would service, what that means, additions of new machines, additions of new users, that sort of thing. Once again, all of this is customizable. And we passed it, but there was a chart of managed service response times. That's, of course, becomes very important now, and there's contractual language coming up to kind of override some of that. There you go. Yep, and now, and if you have a knock, I've got pieces in there for the knock as well, if you use knock services. Yeah, and if we could just scroll back down to maybe some of the contract language, that'd be great. Yeah, everyone just keep in mind, this is, we're not sure what happened here, but Google Docs seem to have somewhat mangled the formatting. I'm not sure what that's about, but it'll look a lot prettier when you get the version that Jonathan makes available. But yeah, some of the things on here are, this is kind of agreements about payment. And just, I've put a lot of fields in here for anyone who wants to use this so that it can be adjusted in any way. And I do want to make it, I think Jay brought up too, my phone number's on there. Probably best to email first, but I am totally open to contact me on LinkedIn, send me a text, call me. Anyone wants to talk about this, kind of my work with Ninja, I'm more than happy to help people out and give you a few tips on how to use this agreement, talk to you about your particular situation. I have been in the channel for 23 years, and I spent 15 of that as an MSP owner. So, but now I kind of work on this other side, but I still enjoy kind of getting down into the mix with MSP owners. And then if you keep scrolling down, there's some caveats in here about the addition of location and assets. Kind of what these are just, this kind of still goes all to the offerings well before the contract and what that all means. And we have some signature lines. Of course, we all know if you can take an ACH or something else like that, do that preferably, kind of left an ACH form in here. These are kind of things too that, you might swap out for your own. As Jonathan's mentioned, I like to mention state laws do vary. We also have some people I'm sure on from other countries as well. Kind of a lot of this, and I think a lot of the strength of this document is going to be in presentation, how you present your services, and then as we go down further, as we get into some of the contract language and protecting your business. And I think we're getting down to it soon. So yeah, now the terms and conditions. And we've gone through, we did a force majeure already. We covered that in another MSP Live Chat. But of course, going into here, I especially like, it's interesting. I read something like this now and I go, without limitation, acts of God, acts of public enemy, pandemics, fires, floods, wars, civil disturbances, sabotage, accidents, insurrection, terrorism, blockades, embargoes, explosions, labor disputes. I don't know about you, Jonathan, but I think we've had all of these in the last 12 months. I mean, pretty unbelievable. So, getting down into this, and then, but also following up on that force majeure, it goes on. And number 4 here, client work has substantially changed. Evaluate the need to change IP services. Once again, providing the client some leeway, but protecting yourself at the same time. And then there's some.
Can you explain that a little bit further, Tom?
Yeah, because what I want to do is I want clients to feel like a contract isn't completely set in stone, that there is some flexibility and that we're there for you. So we put quite a bit of language in here surrounding that, even about how much changes in users or reductions. Some of this stuff and deferred billings, some of these things I would even recommend taking out of the agreement. We have them in here, but have them ready to put back in or to drop in an email if you're negotiating that way to a change in service with a client. And then scrolling down
saying
more.
That because it's something that you don't want to give the idea if it's not necessary, or why do you say that?
Yeah, you might not, but you might do it situationally. I kind of put it in here for convenience that people could have it. There might be people out there, their relationships are such that they want that known, or maybe they have a certain vertical that they're very strong in and they need to have, and they have it's cyclical in nature, or they want to have the ability to go up and down in payments and how much. But then, if we can scroll down again to the next page. And then right here, we've got just up a little more. We've got some interesting sections here on remote. Go up just a little more to the end of the last page. Yeah. Right here. However, home or alternative networks may not have adequate internet connectivity and equipment to effectively work, and kind of explaining you're not responsible for that. And I've kind of already replied and mentioned a little earlier, if you've got, my key thing I did with law firms, because I was strong in that vertical, was to just cover the networks and set them up of the top people. And that could, of course, be applied to any vertical. But, this is kind of making sure you're not on the hook for what happens, because I know a problem, and Jonathan, we've had people talk about this. We've gone from people that were covering one network to what is that one network now when everyone's working from home? Now is it 30 or 40 networks and equipment that you didn't purchase or authorize, and people doing other things on that network and possibly interrupting the ability to work. And so making sure you can point back to your agreement and say, hey, listen, this is what we cover and this is why. And then make adjustments as needed. And then also number 8 in here, and I think George attributed this too, in the event of force majeure, MSP is not required to have technicians work during periods or at places where their safety or health could be in jeopardy. In any event, will not require technicians to go on site. So this so it leaves it up to you. So you can decide that the force majeure is in place, and then you can decide that you've decided that a force majeure has occurred. It's up to you, and then you decide whether or not it is safe for technicians. So then you can get away from, if you have clients that are very demanding of something and it's possibly an unsafe situation. That goes once again to one of my big things is protecting your company and protecting your employees. It's a nice thing to be able to tell your technicians too, you've written something in here to looking out for them as well.
For everyone on the chat here, as Tom's been going through this, is there anything that kind of jumps out to you, or anything that, when you signed up for this chat and you heard, okay, reviewing a new MSA that you're hoping to get to, like any other questions now that we're about 10 minutes away from wrapping up, specific to this example, or just in general, things that you wanted to ask about MSA? I mean, obviously we're not lawyers, but Tom's got the great experience of having just gone through this process of updating. So, and we've got each other on the line too. So.
Yeah, and we'd love to hear from someone that has a particular question or wants to point something out. We've gone through the majority of what I wanted to hit on this agreement, which are, I use this as a sales document. It's my primary thing on the table, and that I didn't like to have a proposal and then an agreement, just one document. And then I want to make sure all the protections are in there. And if you take anything from this, it would be make sure you're protected in terms of your business, force majeures, how you get paid and when, how you're discounting and protecting your employees.
Well, going to that, pivoting over to that point, Tom, talking a little bit more about using this as a sales tool, but also just making it something that's more than just a formality, something that's actually useful. You've got some general tips I know you wanted to share in terms of just keeping this clear and concise, trying to use whenever possible, avoiding complexity, avoiding jargon. Anything else like that? Length too. I know you had some ideas about that. I know you have specific stories about MSPs that you've worked with 55-page documents, things like that.
Yeah, I would just say the main thing is that you get, I've seen a lot of managed service agreements out there that were 40, 50 pages long, and that I couldn't tell exactly what the client was getting. And my thing is to have that in a clear section, preferably up front, and to make sure the client can see that too. So that they know what they get with their contract. So then when they need to refer to it, they have that as a reference point to start the conversation from. And then also my big thing was in going back and taking this older managed service agreement and bringing it up to the times, is that people on the call think about, I'm sure there's MSP owners who've been around for 20 years or longer. Think about your clients that are maybe on that original agreement. And does that original agreement reflect what they're getting or those services? And how do you go back now when it's time for renewal and bring up a new agreement and maybe get them to sign off on it?
Here's a question that's kind of related to that a little bit. What about set price increases or almost holding the price over the term of the contract? And then we could also talk about terms of contract too. I know you got opinions about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there are some clauses in here, I don't know exactly where it has upon renewals, and this was a standard 3-year contract, upon renewals, it went up, I think, 10%. And having some kind of stipulation there, and also it's an auto-renewing contract, which I recommend. Auto-renewing, and I didn't believe in trying to hold anyone to a full year-long contract or multi-year. I made it a 3-year contract for convenience sake, but then if someone wanted out, they need to give me 1 month's notice and pay any amount too. That was it. I think we all know that trying to hold people to things that aren't working, it's usually not working for both parties. It doesn't work, name, but that's pretty much right here. And it talks about termination right here within 30 days of billing. So pretty standard. So we have a question here. When you state the service, you will provide in plain English and you amplify how you deliver those services, you have a lot of, notwithstanding anything to the contrary. Okay.
Well, we have another question too. Maybe this is a little bit related from Ross, and he is saying, where's the list of services not included, or language stating that anything not stated is automatically excluded from being covered?
Well, I mean, we didn't get into exclusions. We focused on this is what you get under the agreement, because if you start going into here's all the things you don't get, that list can be enormous and you're gonna have to add to it all the time. My feeling is to contract based on what the offering is.
To that point though, do you have a line anywhere that's basically just clarifying, once again, anything not stated here is not covered? I mean, maybe this comes back to the I can't remember who said it, but in one of our last chats, maybe it was Kyle from Huntress was commenting, for a lot of clients, basically the assumption is to cover everything.
And I've never, I used a similar agreement to this 15 years, and I never had anything like that come up. Like I said, I don't think I'd want to maintain a list of what you don't get, because then, it would be an endless list and endlessly adding to it. And I think that kind of thing is what ends up with a bloated agreement of 40, 50 pages, because, and also it's not very user friendly or contract friendly when you start talking about what you don't get. And contractually, generally, you only need to specify what you get under the terms. It's automatically assumed by law that whatever's not stated that you're receiving is not something that you receive. And then down here, this is an addendum. Thanks for scrolling down to that. This addendum just shows, an overall of everything that the contract starts with. Not expected to always be updating this. Of course, you're going to move these numbers over to your PSA, but it's a nice starting point if anyone needs to look back and see what did we start with when we began this agreement.
Tom, you got another specific question. People were curious what state you were operating out of when you were MSP.
This contract was used in Virginia, Maryland, and Washington, D.C. So it had been reviewed by legal counsel in all three.
Well, with that, I mean, we've got about 5 more minutes, and I wanted to make a couple of plugs before we wrap up, and also give people a chance to ask any other questions, and reiterate the point that Tom made. Tom's available, and he's made it clear. I mean, anytime we've shared this, we actually during our MSP Security Summit, for anyone who attended that, Tom made the offer, hey, anyone who wants to reach out to me to get this agreement, he would do it, and he was getting emails, responding to them. So the point is, if you're reading this, you're actually taking a look, you've got some time over the weekend or whenever, and you got some questions around it, definitely don't hesitate to reach out. He'd be happy to. I'm not just over promising for Tom. I know you'd be happy to talk with people and help them out.
Yeah, Jonathan, I am. There are a lot of nuances here, and like I said, there's also MSPs that are strong in certain verticals. And there's questions of, hey, I already have an agreement. I by no means think that everyone should take this agreement and punch it in and use it, for themselves in every situation. It might be really good for a brand new MSP who's come up with it, but kind of one of the main reasons we put it out is so you can see what others do, how others write things, maybe pull clauses from it or sections or get ideas, kind of ability to look underneath the hood. But yeah, if anyone has any questions about it, feel free to contact me on LinkedIn or my phone number, I guess, is showing up right now. And if you want to go over it, there's no charge for that. I just do it as a part of my work with Ninja. I'm more than happy to help out, anyone who's a fan of Ninja and a fan of this agreement with questions of how they would use it. And I'll do my best to bring my long-term experience in the channel to how I think it could best fit, or we can just talk about other MSP business as well.
Yeah, Jay, we took the phone number off, but I did go, if you go back to the agenda doc, I just added your email in there, Tom. So
all right.
People will have that as well. And then we did a question, Paul and Sammy answered already. Yeah, so a recording is going to be going out most likely tomorrow morning. So you'll have it before the weekend. And then, like I said, we'll have you'll have this document here too, the agenda, which has links to the MSA. If you didn't get the MSA link, we'll also include that link in the email, so you'll have that a couple different ways. There's also additional resources I plugged in here. Just wanted to call those out really quickly. First, we did a webinar way back. It feels like forever ago, but I think it was back in December of last year, where we had Bradley Gross on, who was a name that may ring some bells. He's a very popular attorney for specializing with MSPs. He talks about legal risks, specifically around ransomware, but he's got some good points about your managed services agreement there. And then also giving George a plug, who came on. Thank you again, George. He's got the MSP Initiative series, which I was just on one earlier today. They're awesome. They're chats like this one, where he's getting various other MSPs and vendors and experts to come on. He's got a couple with Bradley on there as well. Last thing.
Yeah.
Oh, Ross, you got your
Jonathan,
hand
do we have a minute? Yeah, and have one more person come on. I think that'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do it. That would be great.
Hi, Ross.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
You can.
Yeah, good. Yeah, I was asking, and I think you answered the question about just a simple statement about anything that is not specifically covered is automatically excluded. I think that's all that's necessary in the MSA document. The other question,
there's an exclusionary statement in there. I don't know exactly what part, but I think it was down in those numbered terms.
Yeah, right. Yeah, perfect. The other thing, and I obviously couldn't read the document, about being hacked, ransomware, and that is there some exclusion for liability statement in the MSA that protects the MSP?
There are some statements in there, and there is also the requirement that the client must maintain insurance, cyber insurance too.
Okay.
Yeah, and then there's also I've got some arbitration terms in there too, and where arbitration must take place in the state where the contract was signed, and then also that you have to pay, basically the loser has to pay the fees as well.
The arbiter's fees.
So there's quite a few protections in there for that. But yeah, I definitely recommend beefing up those in terms of, and there are some in there, but also there's some big differences in different states. And that's a great point you brought up. Different states when it comes to, who's on the hook when these kind of things, these kind of hacks occur. So that is something that you really need to make sure that you're following the laws in the individual state.
Right. So if the client is unwilling to obtain cyber insurance, that would be a basis for not taking on the client.
At this point in time, if I had an MSP, I would require all clients to carry it.
Right. Okay.
I mean, that maybe sound restrictive in a way, but it's just the level of liability, and you're going to carry it yourself too. But, if there is something, let's face it, if there is a really big breach, you want to make sure everyone is able to kind of assume a piece of that and take care of it.
Has there been any collective experience of prospective clients refusing to obtain cyber insurance?
I don't know. I mean, that's kind of going to have to be, probably a discussion for people that are right in the game right now. I've known quite a few MSP owners, but I've been working on the vendor side who do have that requirement. I think that, anyone who's running a business and relying on their computers for it is insane not to have their business insurance cover cyber at some level.
Yeah, that was not so much directed at you, Tom, but the larger audience.
Right. Anyone in the chat, I mean, yeah, it'd be great to hear. And Ross, what I'll do too is to this agenda doc, I'm going to add a link to, during our security summit, we had a session devoted specifically to cyber insurance and FAQs. And this did come up as a talking point. I don't recall that anyone was specifically recounting their experiences with clients refusing to do it, but there's a lot of helpful information shared, some additional links for finding out more. And I'll certainly add that so you can check that out as well.
Right. Yeah.
Kind of related to that, actually, I was curious, Tom, one thing I forgot to add to the agenda, and I know we're over time here, so anyone who has to jump, thank you so much for joining. But people who can stick around, let me know if you're interested in this. So I know that another question that comes up a lot is whether MSPs asking if others have given their clients, basically forced them to sign off on certain risk, that they're not going to be covered in certain ways. If they're refusing to purchase certain cybersecurity solutions or adhere to certain requirements and procedures, they're basically not going to hold the MSP accountable. And that's something that I've seen a question asked, and it gets a variety of different answers. Tom, did you have any experience with that when you were an owner?
Yeah, I was pretty strict on stuff when people wanted to, sometimes you walk into a room and someone take your agreement and they marked up a whole bunch and crossed things out. And it's like, you're like, come on. But my big thing is that, I sold it as, hey, listen, guys, I can't have a separate agreement for everyone. So if everyone else has signed this, all my clients, if you can't, I understand. But if we're going to do business, you guys sign like everyone else. And I kind of did it that way, and it worked pretty well for me. Now I think times have changed. I think it's a lot more with cybersecurity issues going on and threats. It's a much bigger issue. I will make one point that comes to mind as we close things out here is you got to watch out saying those things in your contract. If you say something like, hey, listen, if you get hit by a virus, it's not our fault. You sign off on it, it's not our fault. Well, if that virus or that ransomware attack comes through your systems, that's not going to hold up in court. So make sure that when you're writing things like that, statements of what you're not responsible for, that they have a legal basis for what you can actually support.
If the client, Tom or Jonathan, has not obtained cyber insurance when you're signing them up, do you then go back 60 days later and ask for proof that they've obtained cyber insurance?
I would put off the signing of it and the start date of the service agreement until they have it. I mean, it's generally a pretty quick process to get some level of insurance in place. They might have to go through some kind of audit for some full amount, but their business insurance provider should be able to give them some level of cyber insurance on their standard business insurance policy. And then maybe you sign off on that and contingent upon a more, after they're getting maybe a higher level policy and going through some type of technical audit to get it. But
Yeah.
I just wouldn't move forward on any of that, because I know that, it's going to come back on the MSP at some level if there is a breach. And so I wouldn't want to put my business at risk.
Their agent should be able to give them a rider within a week or so to show good faith that they're in the process of getting full-blown coverage.
There you go. That's a good way to put it.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's very helpful. Thank you, Tom. Yeah, thank you, Jonathan, for allowing me to speak directly with Tom. Appreciate it.
Of course. I mean, that's what these types of things are all about. So I'm glad you came on.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, one other point about that, about the cyber insurance need, one thing that came up during the security summit, just the cost of these incidents now is just, they're skyrocketing. They're just getting more and more disruptive, more and more damaging. The costs are going through the roof. And so it really is a very serious thing. And unfortunately, insurance can make the difference between being able to weather that or go under. But like I said, I mean, I would like to end on a cheerier note, first of all, but I will update this document right after this call. I'm going to go grab that recording for the cyber insurance session, and I'll include that as well, because I think there are some good, interesting points there.
Jonathan, could you put Tom's follow-up email address as well, what you send out, please?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks a lot, Ross. And
well, thanks for joining us, I think.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. Tom, I know,
thank you for sharing your document. Very helpful. Very well thought out. A lot of effort and thought went into it. Very clearly. You really quite a contribution.
Yeah, I really appreciate it, Tom. And on that note, we just have your contact information right there in the chat too. But let's close on a note where this is something we wanted to try. We did this before. Switching gears a little bit. Does anyone have any wins? And of course, if there's any other burning questions we want to ask before we jet off, you can certainly do that too. But, we have, with everything being so kind of doom and gloom for a while, or just everything involved with the crisis, tons of negative news. But there's a lot of positive stuff happening right now too, especially within this community, because really, truth be told, MSPs have at the heart of keeping so many businesses functioning during this period. And so we've had some really great stories shared in previous chats of people getting acknowledgement from clients, getting thank yous. Maybe your staff has been appreciative of the way you've been handling things too. Just kind of interested if anyone has a good kind of win to share that we could close out on. And Tom, I know you've heard some good things too.
Absolutely. Well, if we don't, I mean,
Hey,
well, there you
that.
go. Lumber mill of all things. Yeah. And I think, that points to kind of a vertical that maybe has weathered things a little bit better. I know that in a lot of areas, building construction has kept going, and a lumber mill makes sense. It's interesting.
Congratulations,
I had a
Brian.
lumber mill.
That's great.
Yeah, I had a lumber mill for years as a client. Wasn't my favorite client though, but but definitely solid to have a lumber mill.
You can tell Brian that the things that he can watch out for later down the line, the parents he'll have. But in the meantime, let him enjoy this. It's a new client.
Jonathan, what I had to watch out for is we go through there, and they did stairs as a part of the lumber mill too. They built stairs, and you walk through this area to get to the offices. They were staining all these stairs, and I mean, you have like a headache for 3 days after you walk through that room.
It says big box home improvement stores selling all the boards they can make right now. That makes sense. Everyone's home, building onto everyone's got little projects they're doing. It totally makes sense. Well, Brian, thanks for sharing that. I mean, that's great. Yeah, it's been interesting to see everyone's situation is so totally different. Tina, and sod company, plumbing company, doing well so far. That's good. But everyone's situation is so different in terms of what's happening right now, how slow things are, or you've got other stories of people really, business really picking up in different areas too. And so, just interesting to hear from people on both sides of that coin. Well, I think we'll probably wrap up there, but thank you so much, everybody, for joining. And like we said, we're going to respond with an email tomorrow that'll have the recording. It's going to have Tom's contact info. It'll have a link to this agenda that'll be updated with those other things we mentioned. And then the last thing I'll toss out there is, Sammy, if you could scroll down to the bottom there, we do have something that we want to get, a contest that we're running. And I don't know what everyone's situation is, if you're still working from home or if you've gone back to an office. I know my work from home situation is a little DIY, and we're doing a sweepstakes basically, where you can enter it to win a souped up workstation. And so that if you go over to the link there, I think it gives you some more details about exactly what we're giving away. But it's pretty cool setup with a souped up monitor and all this other stuff. So maybe if your setup's good, that's cool. But if you have friends that you're a little jealous of, maybe now's your chance to get even with them. And the last thing I'll mention too is, so we're going to be hosting this. We're going to get back in the regular rhythm. We're going to try to do this every other week. And the next series of chats that we've got lined up, we decided based on some feedback that having things revolve around sales makes a lot of sense. And so the next topic, this is tentative, but June 11th, we're going to talk about revamping your sales process. And we're lining up some really cool guests to come on. And this is going to be a series, maybe 2 or 3 chats. That's something to look forward to. I know, not available in Canada. I'm sorry. I did have to caveat that before you got too excited, Michael. I'm sorry about that. The Battle Station sweepstakes is for US only, I believe. We will have to make an effort to help out our Canadian partners. Maybe give them something else. So Michael, don't worry. I'll see what we can do for you, buddy. But thanks everybody again. I think we'll wrap up there, and appreciate it. Everyone stay safe. Have a good end of the week, and we'll be following up soon.
Thank you.
Thanks again, Tom.